One Punch Man looks like an average action anime that you can binge in an afternoon and forget about. But underneath its simple premise are decades of unresolved cultural issues unique to Japan, brought to life by a webcomic that looks like it was an elementary school project. Japan's uncomfortable past is rarely spoken of, especially in Japan itself. So it's even more surprising that it is the reason One Punch Man's world exists in the first place. And in it, only the people who can transcend Japan's cultural burden can live a truly happy life. Let me tell you about One Punch Man and the history that created it. There are three key aspects of Japanese history that are crucial to One Punch Man. The first is the atrocities committed by the Empire of Japan and the improper management of the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal by the United States afterwards. The second is the economic stagnation since the 1990s, which left the young generations with stagnant wages and an aging population that receives the attention of the government. And the third is the cultural influence of samurai and the concept of faith, which stops Japanese from expressing their true feelings. The three combined create a vacuum of negative energy, which manifests itself in physical form through humanoid monsters and humans who turned into monsters. Their only goal is to bring down Japanese society, make it suffer for what it did. With a firm religious belief in Shinto, in which the spirits of the dead remain among the living and influence their lives, and Buddhism, in which karma plays an important role, it is confusing why the Japanese or its government have not made similar or even stronger efforts than Germany to atone for the millions murdered during the Second World War or the occupation of Korea in the beginning of the 20th century, which is still souring international relationships. But because they didn't, the monsters of One Punch Man exist. In this world, your life is in the hands of incompetent heroes, while the government is busy handing out checks to the elderly population. Just as the monsters appear with varying strength levels, some civilians gain superhuman abilities. They are called heroes and are managed by the Hero Association, a private company funded by a mysterious multimillionaire. As the government budget is used to rebuild cities from the daily attacks and to distribute pension to its old population, the Hero Association takes the critical role of national defense. What sounds rational at first is actually a huge mistake. Publicly, the Hero Association is funded by donations from the population. But in reality, the board of the Hero Association consists of CEOs from multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, which make money from rebuilding the destroyed infrastructure. On purpose, they make sure that the national defense does not resemble an organized military. The heroes are not trained to be soldiers. They are civilians doing a voluntary service. They don't have to show up if they don't want to, and their egos never get put into place. The Hero Association sends out the weakest heroes first, and when there is enough damage done to the infrastructure, higher-level heroes are contacted. Afterwards, the cities are being rebuilt in record speed. But just as in Korea or China these days, the buildings are not made to last. But because the monster attacks are so common, it is not seen as an issue by the government. The only thing built properly is the Hero Association headquarters. Considering the frequent attacks, the general population still enjoys a fairly high living standard. Supply chains, electricity, and material production are only minimally affected. Japan has learned early on that the monsters only appear in or destroy the cities in which humans live, so it built the industry in the rural areas. But considering the death toll over the years, which has to be in the millions, there are a lot more resources available for a lot less people. As shelters are not 100% reliable and a monster attack could happen every day, the people have accepted their fate and maybe even live happier, knowing that every moment could be the last. Or the insane rebuilding efforts created a new burst in the Japanese economy, making everyone better off. Despite absurd amounts of money being poured into rebuilding the country, little research is done on how to stop the monsters from appearing in the first place. Even though the monsters openly tell their origin story to anyone who wants to listen. They were humans, but transformed because of suppressed anger or never processed trauma. And the actual monsters are born out of hatred towards what Japan has done. It can't get any more obvious than that. But the Hero Association makes money through destruction and rebuilding, which gives them no incentives to dig further. The government might have an idea, but cultural pride stops them from looking into their horrific past. Because if anyone has to repent, like the monsters proclaim during every attack, it is Japan. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the Empire of Japan waged wars against China and Russia, occupied Korea, and during the Second World War, expanded all over Southeast Asia. Countless atrocities were committed, but not properly resolved after Japan's defeat, as the US, in sole charge of the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal, had other interests at heart with post-war Japan, mainly, in face of the beginning Cold War, to make Japan a pro-capitalist democracy. The trial itself was plagued with issues, from underlying racism with initially only one of the 9 judges being Asian, to a rushed and unfair trial procedure, disadvantaging Japanese attorneys trained in European legal traditions. Furthermore, there was a bias in giving certain industrialists a more lenient verdict, by excluding their involvement from Class A war crimes. And the Emperor Hirohito was intentionally not prosecuted. Evidence of his involvement was manipulated, and the defense kept him invisible so the US could use him for their occupation reforms. It was especially perverse that no Korean served as a judge or prosecutor, although hundreds of thousands of colonized Korean men and women had been brutalized by the Japanese war machine, as comfort women, as laborers forced to work in the most onerous sectors of mining and heavy industry in Japan, or as lowly conscripts in the military. The Japanese government proposed conducting its own trials, but faced opposition from the Allies, who believed the Japanese could not impartially judge themselves due to assumed collective responsibility for the war. Instead of using the trial to lay a foundation of remembrance and solidarity among the nations, the US managed to do the opposite. When you are faced with an unprofessional and biased trial, you don't feel guilt and remorse, but resentment and disappointment. After the denazification period, Germany developed a culture of remembrance, to the point where patriotism is seen almost identical to nationalism. In contrast, Japan has a culture that avoids direct confrontation and losing face. Atrocities were ignored and erased from public memory. For decades, they were downplayed in school textbooks, and if you bring them up today, many Japanese will feel offended being confronted with their uncomfortable past. Government officials still travel to the emperor's tomb as if he had no say in World War II, and when other countries put up memorials to remember the victims of the atrocities, Japan's government tries to take them down with the reason of disturbing the peace. Without resolving the issues of the past and the feelings associated with them, Japan will only continue to harm itself and its future generations. It already does so culturally, but now also physically, through the monsters nourishing on the hatred carried over from generation to generation. After recovering from the aftermath of the war, the US reintegrated Japan back into the global economy, and within less than 30 years, Japan became the second largest economy on the planet. In an ever-increasing race to the top in the 1980s, monetary policies were loosened, and a real estate and stock bubble emerged, which burst in the early 90s. The following 3 decades are famously termed the lost decades. Economic decline and then stagnation, lower household income, lower productivity, lower birth rates. In 1989, of the world's top 50 companies by market cap, 32 were Japanese. Today, there's only one left. One, the creator of One Punch Man, was born in 1986, near the peak of the economic bubble. When he was 6, the bubble had burst, and when he graduated from school in 2004, The economy was back where it had been 20 years prior. One was one of the many young Japanese who grew up seeing their country fall from grace and then stuck in the lost decades. After the bubble, household spending declined, so the government stepped in and invested into the infrastructure of the country. Generous spending allowed living standards to rise, but new issues became obvious. Japan's demographical change made the government focus on the growing elderly population, and stagnant wages made the young population feel left behind. Despite their enormous frustration, they were barely able to let it out in a productive way, due to another aspect of Japanese culture. In Japan, there is a strong separation between your true feelings and the feelings you are allowed to show publicly. In public, you want to keep the social harmony and don't stand out. Despite your actual feelings, you avoid direct confrontation or disagreement to keep your face. Some form of this can be attributed back to the samurai, which would endure ridiculous pain or even kill themselves to not stain their honor. The hero king is the physical manifestation of face. On the outside, he seems calm and reserved, but on the inside, he is scared and horrified. He can never show his true self, because then his image, his face, would be stained. If you watch Japanese movies made after the early 2000s, you can see how this imbalance is represented in the main characters. They force themselves to maintain public harmony while their life is in shambles and emotions boil inside them, eventually bursting out in uncontrollable violence. While these movies are fiction, they are a mirror of Japanese society. The emergence of anime and kawaii culture is the extreme on the other end, trying to hide the gruesome reality with overwhelming cuteness and love, which then is, ironically, sexualized. Collective trauma from suppressed emotions, never processed war atrocities, and decades of economic stagnation created the monsters living inside us. Shinto and Buddhism have always hinted at the causes and offer ways to make peace with the past, but they are not being taken serious enough to create real change. One Punch Man represents a surprisingly accurate reflection of Japan's cultural issues, without mentioning them at any point. It shows us how even in a world-ending scenario, capitalism finds a way to keep the economy going, even if it's just for never-ending war. The only person who found a solution in this madness is the main character Saitama. Saitama was a frustrated young man, struggling to find meaning in a stagnant economy, until he let go of his public image and the expectations laid on him. He faced and overcame the demons inside him to the point where none of them can harm him anymore. He has transcended Japanese culture and his human form. Because he exists outside of cultural norms, none of the heroes or humans can recognize or understand what he really is. And even if the world looks like it will fall apart every day, Saitama is not bothered by it. Because he knows, even after the worst days, life will go on this blue planet, floating through infinity.